Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I still want to say Shadowverse, but I haven't played Shadowverse in months. I guess I played it long enough to get in the habit of saying that. Today is Friday, May 13th, and with any luck, I'll catch up with my 2-week hiatus and a forced hiatus of my computer being broken. As far as old news, which will leave us as far as Monday set for new news. The Fusion Festival is happening here, so I need to focus on that. The other thing that I'm thinking too, and then this is probably a terrible time to do it, but is I think I might just take a little bit more time off in the summers. It is hot, to say the least, so like staying in an air-conditioned room playing video games is probably the best idea, yes, but I also have made some progress on some of my side projects and just generally summer cleaning instead of spring cleaning. And I kind of want to make some more progress there. So I don't know if I'm going to specifically wanted to actually look at those cards. Can we actually look at these cards? Yeah, but it takes 2 clicks to get to it. I think I kind of know what's going on here with these fusion cards. Somewhat. I maybe understand it 20% enough that I think I can just jump into the game and try and figure it out as you play the games. It just really isn't an effective way to try and learn cards, and this is probably a problem with all collectible card games, is that unless you have that free time in which you're not also playing the game, you're not going to sit at a deck and do the whole deck building aspect as much. And because these collectible card games are now digital and you can just always play a game, you don't have that free time. It's the exact opposite of what would be the reality if you were a kid playing just the paper games back in the old days. Certainly when there wasn't digital forms of playing collectible card games, because then you would have cards and you'd only have maybe a small selection of people that would play something like Magic the Gathering with you, and arguably even if you did have that, interesting, this is a different mate. This could be a problem if all of a sudden we start to see like mates and items that are from crossovers for the Japanese audience that never gets brought over to the rest of the world. That was one of the things that Shadowverse kind of had a feeling of. This is new music too. And if anything, I would say they are wasting their time doing too much effort on making the music good. It's already distractingly good when it should just be kind of generically easy to ignore. Okay, we might as well do that, I suppose. Then which one? Yeah, I guess you probably want the same guy again. Reason being that reduces the number of cards in your deck and gives you better draws later. That'd be my guess as to what you'd want to do there. There's probably a much better strategy than that, but we'll stick with that strategy. Might as well just activate this trap, I guess. Standby phase. During both players' standby phase, it goes up. But then as soon as he goes to attack phase, it'll just go down. So I don't know what the whole idea there was of him attacking. But yeah, I'm not committed, certainly, but I'm mulling over the idea of taking summers off and working on side projects, particularly when it's my choice and I'm not forced into it. It's a different situation, certainly, than just being forced into it. Plus, that'll give me more time to send back my graphics card and hope that I get a replacement and then that fixes everything. Of course, that doesn't push my computer to test if that's really the problem. I'm just gonna end the turn here. Looks like this gets returned during the standby phase anyways. But yeah, I still have a desk I want to dismantle, and I'm still, hopefully by Sunday I'll be done with building the last bits of my Lego shelves that I've been building for months, very slowly on my free time. And that's why it's taken so long, is that I've just not really prioritized it. But I'm putting LED things. One thing to say is, basically I'm doing 5 LED strips, less than 5 really, because of the way I've chopped it up and gotten exact lengths. And even at less than 5 light strips, by about the 2 light strip point, you're having to re-inject power from the same source. It seems like it's fine because I have like a 30-watt DC power supply, but it really uses a lot of power. It really gets really hot. Like, might as well just not attack here again. Like, so I really think there is probably a nightmare scenario that you run into if you were to try to put LED strips around your house. It's just going to be a lot more work than it seems like, and a lot more effort than you think. Now, I'm using light strips that have like LEDs right next to each other. There's like 144 LEDs per strand. I imagine if you're using one that has like 60 LEDs per strand, you're effectively reducing the amount of power it needs. But yeah, they start to dim really fast. And maybe outside that doesn't matter, but then again, if you're outside with LED strips, it would be weird, certainly. Because at nighttime it would probably be pretty bright. During daytime it would probably not be that visible at all. Right. Activate this. Negate his effects. Ooh, we'll just steal this thing. Special summon something from the graveyard. Let's see if we can. bring back some people. Do we have anything big we want to summon? Can't activate this now. But let's start attacking and see what happens. This is kind of a slow deck, I have to say. It's been about 10 minutes and we're still in the first game. Yeah, I don't know if I have really anything else to say. I'm still working on the Circuit Playground Express, which I was actually a little shocked that they even bothered to Adafruit, the makers / sellers of it. I was really surprised they even bothered to say that they had more in stock, because really it feels like the Circuit Playground Express was abandoned about 2 years ago as a concept. But I mean, chip shortage also started about 2 years ago. It desperately could use some upgrades, and it desperately could use a screen of some sort. Like what would be different now certainly is there are tiny little watch screens that would make so much sense to just stick on the back of a Circuit Playground Express as a round LCD, but you would need a much better chip, or you would need a you would need a video card, effectively a chip exclusively dedicated to being a video processor. But yeah, that would be a major improvement, certainly, on its ability to do things interesting. But yeah, the only thing I really have to say about that code is that it messed up, and it's effectively forcing me to rewrite the code from scratch and just copy it over bit by bit. This is a thing that happens in MakeCode. It's happened to me a couple times, which really just highlights how MakeCode is not a viable level of code that you should use, or a programming code you should use, because that's just kind of like completely unacceptable that you would hope this is a good effect here that's happening. Yeah, it really is just like completely unacceptable that code would just corrupt and that you would have to start all over again. But it does give me an excuse to do some better programming instead of having settings as their own separate variables. Instead, making a settings array variables, rethinking how code is, just to make it more efficient and easier to read, because I am doing quite a lot. It's still really only about 300 lines of code, but 300 lines of code compared to in text compared to Scratch visual blocky programming is quite different. Like, it's very easy to scroll down 300 lines of code in text. It's pretty difficult to pan and scan effectively, pan a visual group of blocks around. I need something here that can destroy a monster. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I've got something like that. I think this is the one we need. Hopefully. This definitely is a case of me learning as I go. Destiny Hero Dystopia. Banish card. Now, if I banish this card for 1,000, does that stop it from activating its effect? No. Well, I'm doomed. But yeah, I really haven't been doing much in the past couple days. In fact, I've just been feeling really sick and dehydrated and like spent most of yesterday just, I barely ate anything, felt dizzy. I'm jokingly questioning whether there might be a virus out there that causes people to be dizzy. But I doubt there really is. But yeah, I really didn't accomplish much yesterday. And I just don't really feel like I'm going to accomplish too much over the weekend either with the heat. And I've got the air conditioner on, certainly. Wow, 700 for that too. There really needs to be some reward for just the amount of time you put in. Like 1,000 points for every minute. Particularly when you have that timer going anyways. Unlike other collectible card games, there's not any real particular challenges that we need to focus on. They will just happen. There are challenges, certainly, but like no real need to try something special. Just play these loner decks. I could also certainly look at my pre-made decks and see if there's some level of limitation. I have not seen any of these cards at all. Almost certainly this is a deck made up of cards from a later anime series. Thematically, this deck makes a lot of sense as far as the new cards I've seen. Although polymerization and cards like that still look exactly the same. Probably wouldn't be incredibly crazy if they made different art for polymerization, as it is a very old card, but by sticking to their guns and not making different art, this is something Magic the Gathering does all the time, is they make different art for the same cards. By sticking to their guns and keeping everything looking the same, it makes it much easier to play and understand what cards are being played, because you effectively do have an advantage if you can play odd looking cards and then your opponent doesn't understand or doesn't immediately recognize what that card is or how to play against it. Yep. I will also say, since this is a very light accountability section and we're just going to jump into the old news, that having the one person on the chat yesterday Wednesday showed a complete improvement to my YouTube channel. Like, even before the live stream was done, I was getting 10, 11, 12 views. Very often I get no views, 1 view, 2 views on these live streams. So the engagement does work to a certain level. Arguably, maybe at 15, with an average view duration of 5 minutes and going 3 hours, the algorithm almost certainly at that point realized it didn't want to recommend my channel to anyone else. So I still apparently get shut down by the algorithm, which that is the flaw, certainly as I see it, in the YouTube algorithm, is that it really fails to find the audience that I believe actually exists out there for content creators. It pushes instead the entirety of the YouTube audience towards the top 100 videos of the day, and just tries to push everybody to see the latest PewDiePies, the latest big ticket videos, instead of saying, hey, we know specifically that this one viewer is a bit of a weirdo and he likes these very niche, unique videos. So let's put these unique videos in front of him, because obviously that's what he wants to see. And you probably see this. I see this all the time on the suggestions page, as I get suggested Vimeo music videos. I've never listened to a Vimeo music video in my life. I get suggested all kinds of weird stuff. Yet if I watch a video about like woodworking or maker stuff, building electronic projects, if I watch my own videos, things like that, they barely get recommended, if they get recommended at all. And even if I do watch something, it almost certainly then tries to push you to the biggest creator in that same category, instead of deciding that maybe the person that the small niche creator that you're listening to because you actually like that one creator. You see this in Hollywood certainly also, in the sense that instead of new actors in every single movie, you see the same actors over and over again. Tom Cruise, The Rock, it's just same people over and over again, ridiculously. Suppose I will also have to warn that since we are going to be covering Gamatsu articles today, and it is Friday, this will be the more Japanese-centric game news this Friday, which works out kind of nicely. Japanese games, Japanese visual novels also tend to lean more towards the romance, the lewd stories. So Friday's going to be a little bit more NSFW, but not really. We'll still stay within the bounds of YouTube family friendliness. I did transfer over the Bethesda library to Steam. Apparently I did somehow, and I almost certainly got it for free. No, I think I got Wolfenstein Youngblood for free when I bought my video card, and it was a Bethesda game. So now I own Wolfenstein Youngblood on Steam, which is good, because I did a long time ago, and I've not gotten back to it, play the original Wolfenstein reboot game. And so I would like to, what was it? The Wolfenstein The New Order was the first reboot game, I think is the name of it. And I would like to kind of move forward down that direction. That being said, Youngblood, I think, most people felt was a kind of diversion from what the story should have been. See if we can do this. See what this does. Yeah, 2 games in, it definitely feels like everybody has better decks than these loner decks. And depending on the limitations, I very easily could just be playing my own deck. RetroArch is kind of back to adding their cores, their emulation cores on Steam. So VBA-M has been added to Steam. SMS plus GX has been added to Steam. I'm not going to go into any details here. These are different emulators. Quick NES obviously is for emulating NES games. And then FCE-UM, I believe, is also for NES game emulation. One of the things they seem to be doing here, as they have very few screenshots, is it seems like they are showing off open source, non-copyrighted games being emulated on the screenshots, which, okay, I guess that's probably a little bit safer, because Steam is definitely walking a bit of a fine line, even allowing emulation software. On their storefront as a storefront selling games. But it is very convenient, potentially also for the Steam Deck, which, remember, the Steam Deck exists. Like, they're still trying to fulfill all the reservations, and once all the reservations have been fulfilled, it is going to be questionable what that second phase looks like, as far as how many more people are going to want the Steam Deck in a second phase when there really hasn't been a lot of hype around it, or any kind of major improvements. Like, if I was Valve, if Valve ran like a regular company, you'd almost certainly expect them to go that next step and have a update to the software, a major update to the software, just ready to go as soon as they start selling more Steam Decks again. The National Video Game Museum is showing off a photo of a Tomb Raider statue. Let's see the actual story here. Love this uber rare collectibles. Check out this Lara Croft Bed of Roses statuette. There were reportedly only 50 of these produced, and even fewer were made it to 2022 without breaking. Statuettes were exclusively given away to Eidos Interactive employees in 1999. So effectively, this is priceless. Like, I mean, you could certainly auction anything off for a price, but irreplaceable, extremely rare. It's as priceless as priceless can get in my book. And that really is the kind of stuff that belongs in a museum more than in a private collector's hands, as far as video game content, or video game stuff. Yeah, and I would only expand, I guess, on that to say that it does look like the National Video Game Museum has managed to successfully survive the pandemic, as far as it seems. So that is a level of stability that I'd like to see as someone who at some point in the future plans on donating their own Nintendo collection to the museum. Alright, well, let's now play this deck so we can say we've at least played each of the decks. These are all very different decks, which I have to say, that is a much better combination than what we had in the previous festivals that have happened so far. In the previous festivals, it definitely felt like it was just the same feeling, same themed decks with slightly different cards. It is an interesting thought, certainly, when a new expansion comes out for a card game, how many good playable decks should come out of that. Magic, with its 5 colors, you would think should have 5 good playable decks with every expansion, but in reality they tend to give you maybe 2 or 3 playable decks with each expansion. I think for other card games, at least a minimum of 2 playable decks makes a lot of sense. 3 or 4 would be great. And by that I mean 3 or 4 different themed decks that feel fairly different and not just slight variations on the same deck. Because obviously there will be infinite numbers of slight variations of decks. Alright, let's start going through the Gematsu article. Azamatai Kawadan, developer, has announced a 3D action adventure game called Incline Railway of Devil's Valley for PC. I think we had already talked about this. This is a really weird looking game. It definitely feels like it's an experiment by some entry-level Japanese developer. You're effectively bullying and wrestling these Oni into an elevator and trying to lead them up the mountain, which I had always assumed that these Shinto gates or Buddhist gates were specifically designed to stop demons and that they couldn't cross through them because they have like blessings and talismans on them. So I don't know what dragging an Oni would do in their belief. But I would assume it would probably burn them to death or into non-existence. It almost, as a concept, feels like it could be a elevator action in a modern day see, a special summon this, and then let's see if that lets me special summon this. Well, let me destroy a card. Yeah, and I'm saying the phrase elevator action as far as this game, even though I don't know if there's even a game called elevator action, but there definitely were old arcade games and old NES games that were about just getting up a level Snow Brothers is kind of like that. Bubble Bobble is kind of like that. Nobody in modern times has really attempted to make a game where it is just constantly going up levels further and further. Because I just don't think those games really worked particularly well. This is almost certainly a game that does not need to be ported to the rest of the world or to the Western world, but seems like it might be. It is a PC game, so it's almost certainly an experiment as far as learning to program PC gaming wise, instead of making PlayStation games or Switch games. There was this concept of, I think they were called Shizo games or poop games, if I can censor myself. The Japanese developers were doing for, at least one Japanese developer was doing for a while there, but it's been pretty much abandoned in favor of polish. If I think about the Japanese audience, and when you think about like anime and stuff like that, like almost all of that is done with an effort for a high level of polish and quality to some extent. There are definitely some low budget animes out there that are pretty awful when they're finished, but very rarely does it come off like they intentionally were trying to do something low quality. That really is just smacks in the face of do your best, which is a Japanese phrase that gets said quite a bit. But yeah, if anything, you could blame a lot of the terrible CGI animes that have come out in the past couple seasons and past couple years on people thinking they can do their best and trying their very best, but just not being qualified or skilled enough to work in that field. Moving on, we have some Young Maiden visual novel bundles. The Jiyu Zengi Hetsu. You know what? Since I'm already far behind today, I don't think I'm going to be trying to pronounce Japanese words too much today. But yeah. From the looks of it, you have number 1 and number 2 of these young maiden teenage girl visual novels coming to Switch on August 25th in Japan. Some of those have made it to the West, but not a ton of them. Nintendo has come out, as far as some current news, talking a little bit about the next generation Switch and how it's a couple years away, and that they're very concerned about it, which is of course what they would have to say. It would be really stupid for them to come out and say we're not concerned about the next generation of the Switch or the replacement console for the Switch, and we're not even thinking about it. There needs to be, in my opinion, a bit of a come to Jesus moment, as far as realizing what were they ambitious about the Switch on day one of the launch and before it launched, and what did really succeed and what didn't. Because they were certainly very ambitious with the Joy-Cons, but then you look at the Switch Lite now, and that pretty much was the abandonment of the Joy-Cons. And so just get rid of that concept. It's not worth holding on to the it really is just not worth holding on to the memories of the Wii now after the Wii U failed and after the Joy-Con and Joy-Con controller drift was a nightmare. Obviously they need to move whether they want to or not in a direction towards online, but they haven't really succeeded greatly as far as their online focus. But it's definitely going to be something to consider that needs to be right up front as a #1 feature in a Switch 2. It needs to be stronger, better battery life, better screen, all those things. Obviously, there's some simple things certainly that would be appreciated. An ability to have games installed and not have to have the cartridge in to play them would be nice. If it was something as generous as once every 30 days you have to put the cartridge in the game in the cartridge, or once a week or even once a day would be fine. But yeah, I think they probably need to realize that the Nintendo Switch is always going to target little kids. There's a lot of older adult gamers too. So half of their audience really is the parents of the kids. Things like Metroid and Bayonetta and things like that needed to come out and been a bit more focused on. The next Switch can't be anywhere as reliant on bringing Wii U ports to the Switch of Mario games, or really even that many Mario games. Like, there probably should be something like Mario Odyssey, but also some of the content in Mario Odyssey could have been left on the cutting room floor for an Odyssey 2 and a Switch 2. They desperately want a gadget of some sort, some kind of gimmick, some kind of gadget that they can add to the Switch to make it stand out, and I just don't. Oh man, I could have summoned that. But I don't know if there really is a need for a I just don't know if there really is a need for a gimmick so much as it could just be the next tablet equivalent, not gaming device. There was a unlimited quest at one point to have a 5-chain counter, but I've already done it, so there's really no reason to bother with that again. You're gonna defuse me. I don't think there's anything else I can do. Oh, that's annoying. So it's a Fusion Festival, and everybody is running Defuse as a card. Let's see, I think we already talked about this. Chick Kip Dancers, and then is launching July 14th in Japan. Again, a very Japanese looking game. It's kind of a wave your hands around dancing mini game. Like, honestly, I think what Nintendo should do for the Switch 2 is probably come out with a console with no portability at all. And don't label it as the Switch or Switch Lite replacement. Label it as this is the addendum that just happens to play the same games, and it even gets 4K or 2K upgraded versions of the games that it downloads from the internet. So there's like a backward compatibility to it. Almost certainly it needs to be some kind of device with discs. Get back to Blu-ray discs, but like that's the only thing that's cheap and has enough space. And so if there was something that you could simply plug into a Switch and it became like a docking station for the Switch that held a lot more space and played Blu-ray discs and was its own separate gaming console, and yet also could stream its video to the Switch using the Switch app, and so there was some bi-directional communication there, so that the Switch was its own second screen controller. That effectively creates what people thought the Wii U was going to be, that the Wii U's controller tablet was going to be its own portable separate thing, and that the docking station that they never even really showed for the Wii U was non-exist. People thought it didn't even exist. It is kind of going back that direction certainly, but yeah, just having a regular old console, something really powerful, something much higher end, something that can be assured that it can actually play the third-party games that everybody else is making. I think that almost certainly is where they need to go. Otherwise, they're going to constantly be left behind making first-party exclusives, which only get them so far, and porting what are closer and closer to mobile phone games and really simplistic games like visual novels. Let's see. We're waiting for a response here. Because like these little indie games here, like they always run, coming to PS4, Xbox One, and Switch, in the next generation, if a Switch 2 can only play games like this, and they can't play Last of Us 2, for instance, or a new Uncharted, or a new Crackdown, or like a new Far Cry, new Crysis, that is going to be a major problem with them. So we had a connection issue. I'm not really having drop frames. Like, I'm not at 0 drop frames. I have 0.1% drop frames, 235 out of, I would say about almost 2 million is frames. So network issues, like that first network issue, I think was probably just my internet service provider, which that's been alright recently, but having a week of just intermittent problems network-wise was unacceptable. So those are the 3 loner decks. Could I select something that's playable? Well, it seems like I could. All these would be forbidden, and everything else seems fine. So I could play that deck without any of the extras, which would be a slight limitation. I could play this deck perfectly fine. I could play this deck perfectly fine. Let's just try that. So the amount of limited decks here really don't feel like they are much. Compared to the previous festivals where they really were restricting you into playing the different kinds of decks. Let's see, Lucasfilm Games and Skydance New Media announced a partnership for a richly cinematic Star Wars action-adventure game. Remember, this is all kind of old news from 2 weeks ago. More information will be due out when the time is right. Yep, we will see probably a lot of announcements of Star Wars games. I wouldn't be surprised if about half of them get canceled before ever actually seeing the light of day, or they just come out and we see quite a flood of Star Wars content. Disney seems to be at this point kind of willing to flood the Star Wars fandom and throw spaghetti at the wall and just see what sticks. As far as Star Wars content and Disney Plus TV shows seem to be the thing that has stuck, and they've just kind of quickly moved away from thinking about doing anything more with, say, the Solo movie, the Rogue One movie. Obviously, at some point they've got to make a Star Wars 10, but I wouldn't be surprised if that is the don't touch it project that they're going to really work on and make sure the structure and the script of the next trilogy of Star Wars movies are going to be really well thought out and done well. I also wouldn't be incredibly surprised if we just never see a Star Wars 10, because there's just be too much concern about it. Like, we may see a Star Wars 10 in the same distance between we saw, like, Ghostbusters, the original Ghostbusters movie versus the Ghostbusters 2016 movie versus Ghostbusters Afterlife. Like 4 to 8 years minimum between the last Star Wars 9 and Star Wars 10, just to hope that people kind of forgot about it and decide to give it another chance. And as long as the Marvel movies are somewhat succeeding for Disney, they'll focus on the Marvel movies. But they really are putting a lot of eggs in one basket with the Marvel movies, and they're, I think, stupidly wasting their time making a lot of live action remakes of their old cartoon movies. I mean, in a lot of ways it's ruining what Disney means in people's minds. Disney used to be a animation company that made cartoons for kids. Now, effectively, they're making live-action movies for adults who are still nostalgic on Disney cartoon movies, which means they're not really gaining the new audience of kids as much as they should be. Moving on, we have Runes Magnus having a gameplay teaser trailer, and this looks slightly interesting as a JRPG, but I don't know how much time I really want to devote to watching blurred out teaser trailers of gameplay, since we're far behind today. Alright. So effectively, if I am allowed to summon this guy, spend 2,000, destroy all of his cards, I've probably won the game at that point. Yeah. Activate that to protect that one. I need to turn off the animations too. Special summon animations. Turn that off. That's wasting too much time, even though it is fancy. Let's see, the Shadowrun trilogy is coming to the PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch on June 21st. That includes Shadowrun Return, Shadowrun Dragonfall Director's Cut, and Shadowrun Hong Kong Extended Edition. If I'm recalling correctly, the Shadowrun series is kind of an XCOM RPG. Classic story-driven RPG. Like, it's the kind of game that definitely feels a little bit older than it probably is from the visuals on it. Let's see, Dragon Quest X offline details Magic Labyrinths, which, okay. I don't think I'll be playing Dragon Quest X offline. I still really have not bothered to figure out what the difference between Dragon Quest X and Dragon Quest X offline is, unless Dragon Quest X originally it was more of a World of Warcraft game, and they're now just taking the content actually made by the creators from a World of Warcraft type game and making an offline experience. As a concept, that's actually not a terrible idea. If you offer to me play World of Warcraft, but it's going to be an offline single player experience, or even single player to maybe a dozen players, if like maybe just even 4 players. If you could go through the entire history of World of Warcraft, but you weren't playing with other people, and you could play at your own pace, there might be something to that. And honestly, Blizzard should have done something like that. They should have said, hey, the content from World of Warcraft was impactful. We know that in fact it affected people and people liked it. So let's retell that tale in a single player experience to let people catch up. Let's do it a lot better, more visually. If you get away from a MMO type experience, you can zoom in and have the camera right over the shoulder of the character you're playing as. You can better animate everything. You can have more voice acting and things like that. That is the idea of remasters, remakes that that I wish more game developers would embrace compared to just low effort remasters or ports of old games. Moving on, Digimon Survive launches July 29th in the West. Which, yeah. It, I suppose, would be a little bit weird to try and play something like Digimon Survive having not played any of the previous Digimon games. But it's probably not that weird, really, because as long as you have seen the first couple seasons of Digimon, you kind of know who these characters are. It's the same Digimon from the first couple seasons. It's the same kids. They've just grown up. Now, there's definitely a Digimon movie in that, and I would say that's probably the best thing to do would be to watch the Digimon movie before playing this game, just to kind of catch up, because that would probably help you a little bit. These are much older versions of these characters, and some of these characters may have been added later on after the first couple of seasons. So that there's something to that you might consider. You'd kind of hope the game almost had a recap. It's kind of a shame that Digimon is potentially moving its story forward in video game form when it started off as an anime series or a manga series, whichever. I wouldn't be surprised if the manga has just been going for decades. But yeah, I probably should have started as a video game series, but had it started as a video game series, it probably wouldn't have been as popular. So it probably should then just stick to an anime series. In the same way, it would be very weird to watch like the animated Mario movie whenever that comes out if you've never played a Mario game. It also would be fairly weird to watch the animated Mario movie and it talk about things that happened in Super Mario Bros. 1 or 2 and completely ignores everything that happens in Odyssey or Mario 64 or even Galaxy. It'd also be weird to make a movie and it only talk about things that happen in like Sunshine, which is the one they're trying to forget more than anything. Moving on, Dreamloop Games has signed a $6-figure US dollar agreement to develop new IP. The studio is behind Stardust Galaxy Warriors. Oh, I guess I should also mention that my favorite lewd mobile game, Destiny Child, has a new update. The story arc they're talking about right now is called La Dolce Vita, and it's moving a narrative storyline forward where the main character that you play as is getting more and more affiliated with this group of college kids, and he keeps getting dragged into dealing with these college kids, and so a new character is added as a cross-player / cosplayer, and so it's this Japanese male character that's cosplaying. He gets brought into cosplaying, but cosplaying as a female character. Which I imagine a lot of that does happen, but perhaps not as much in the West as it is. Almost certainly not as much in the West as in the as it is in the East. Like, it's fairly common for Japanese cosplayers to be so effeminate looking to start with that they can easily, as a male, look like a female, and vice versa is not that much more difficult. Whereas if you went to something like Comic-Con and you saw all the cosplayers there, there's, I suspect, a lot less cross-playing happening there. At a certain level, cosplaying is all about embodying the character that you have come to admire, so it's not as big of a deal to if they happen to be the opposite gender than what you were born with. Whereas in the West, I just think that there's so much stigma around that you often see kind of the opposite happen, where you have female versions of characters made. So instead of God of War, you have female God of War, which that's a fairly common one that I've seen as far as professional cosplayers going that route. And it's definitely done in a very different way, because often, like, the female God of War character is depicted very, very much in a more sexualized version than the male versions of God of War cosplayers. Honestly, males in the West cosplaying at all get really screwed over, because you have professional cosplayers that are getting hired to things like Comic-Con and other conventions that they're getting $1,000 a day potentially to show up, and they're gonna look so much better and draw so much attention that anyone who's just building a costume as a hobby doesn't compete regardless of gender, but then they also are gonna draw attention away from any male cosplayers. So I often see male cosplayers are outnumbered by like 10 to 1, I would say, in most of the pictures I've seen of conventions. Whereas with cross-playing, you might get more of a 50-50 split in Japan, and you just kind of never would know. But yeah, that's really not saying a lot about anything other than Destiny Child has new characters and new updates, and it's still chugging along. Which, yeah, I'm still enjoying it for what it's worth for a game that plays itself. Moving on, Cotton Fantasy launches May 20th in the West. This is the side-scrolling shooter Cotton series being continued. Sonic Origins launches June 23rd for the PS4, PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. I should have just said everything. Yep. Loot River launches May 3rd. I think we probably talked about that. What's funny is that game then I think would have already been out for 10 days, and I have not heard anybody say anything about it. So that must have been a disappointment, unless, yeah, it's May 13th now. Yeah, unless that was delayed. Loot River seemingly has failed miserably. Alright, so you get... We need to figure out if in this festival, whether you get 50 medals. The number of medals you earn is the same regardless of whether you use your own deck or loaner deck. You use the deck to your liking. That was not how it was with the original festival. First one. So we can just kind of goof around and play with these different cards and try and learn something. If I get really desperate, of course I could also try and play my own decks. But if I'm going to get desperate, I'll play off screen with my own decks. And for presentation reasons, we'll stick with playing with new cards and learning while we go. The game Chance of Sonar was confirmed for the Switch and PC. Has a revealed trailer. This is a game that's not out yet, so it's not a lot to do. The Root Letter series shipments and digital sales have topped 500,000, which is kind of a massive amount of success for something that is a visual novel series. 500,000, $300,000 sales is about where I would start to say you're successful. As far as small indie games, 500,000 is where you're probably successful, even as a AAA game. Like, if you need more than 500,000, to succeed otherwise, then you've probably failed miserably. As far as just overspending on advertising and production of a game. Wow, it definitely feels like you could just have a one-turn heal. Yeah. This guy doesn't play. It's not going to be a one-turn kill, but could easily be a two-turn kill. Let's see, the game I Chew has been delayed to winter of 2022 in Japan. This was a rhythm young maiden visual novel game. You know, compared to previous years, it definitely does feel like the Japanese were able to kind of stop delaying so much. The Famitsu scores for issue 1742 gave Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga 33, MLB The Show 30, and Tazamachi Behind the Twilight 28 out of 40. So that's a pretty awful game at 28 out of 40. Yeah. It was pretty much standard business operating procedure to announce something, announce the game in Japan, and then just expect it to be delayed at least once from that original announcement date. Whereas I think the pandemic maybe gave them enough time to not be so behind schedule and overworked that they can now actually make announcement times a little bit more. Plus, it was a pretty bad way of doing business anyways, to bother to make an announcement only knowing that it's almost certainly going to not actually come out that day. Yeah, this is not gonna work. I think we probably had already talked about this Nozomi Kimi no Mari for Switch. I looked into this one a little bit more. You're basically a spirit that's guiding this girl, this anime girl, around. And there's a couple of lewd scenes, it seems like, but probably not a ton of satisfactory scenes. It definitely implies a lot here when you take a more perverse look at like this screenshot that she's got this big massager and that she's got the skirt and you can see her thighs and her underwear. But it is almost certainly a trap product that's not really going to have a satisfactory amount of adult content. And for the most time it is something I guess you'd better describe as a product that's almost like a Tamagotchi, like a virtual pet in the form of an anime girl, and there might be some appeal around that idea. But not probably enough of that. I think when you compare a game like this to just a romance dating visual novel, you're going to get a much better story and a much more coherent narrative from a good romance dating visual novel than you will from the fact that the game moves from 2D to 3D if you make it like that game. And as soon as they spend more budget making 3D models, they lose budget in the storytelling, the narrative, the writing. Let's jump around. Try some different decks. There's still a massive amount of medals that need to be earned. So I need to find a winner here as far as a deck and move forward that way. A smartphone game called Front Mission 2089 Borderscape has been announced for iOS and Android. Apparently the story was updated. It looks interesting as a concept trailer. Square Enix in the middle of selling off games is also announcing smartphone games. It looks like this is a mech game where you're controlling giant robots. At a certain level, you look at like these two Japanese people talking, and this is probably the younger protege to the guy who's really in charge, and you definitely can see this older guy grew up. He may be frankly even a little too old to have grown up watching mech anime in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And then this kid probably exactly grew up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And while that happens in Hollywood too, where there's just way too much emphasis of old people making decisions as to what they think young people like or what they want to see created. It is not really the best of ideas. Like, there needs to be some fresh blood as it is making games and fresh ideas. And frankly, when you're talking like mech games in particular, it's not that we need a fresh twist on a mech game. We need to abandon, as a Westerner, I think they need to abandon mech games until it really starts to make sense. Which in most cases it doesn't make sense. The one mech game that has succeeded probably in the past 10 years, and there was two of them in the series, even that has been mostly abandoned. And even in that case, there was a lot of exceptions that were done to even call that a mech game, because you were jumping out of the mech a lot. Forget the name of it. Let's fuse that one, I guess. And fuse that one. And making a mech game on a smartphone really seems ridiculous, because at that point you're almost certainly not going to be able to in any way really control a mech. You're almost certainly just going to be tapping on the screen and giving commands at best. Moving on, a game called Deathverse Let It Die has its first developer diary. Which, okay. I definitely am not going to be watching developer diaries. I guess Deathverse Let It Die is a successor to Let It Die, which was that weird kind of PlayStation first mobile. It's kind of like a PlayStation first free-to-play game that seemed like it was probably pretty good, but just wasn't ever really going to get a Western audience or anyone to play it. It was on the wrong platform. It was too experimental, too weird. It definitely had the feeling of trying to be an also-ran to something like Fortnite or any other major successful free-to-play game. Gamatsu has the Saints Row reboot Like a Boss customization trailer and screenshots, which, yeah, the customization here really shows off just the silliness and weirdness of what a customized image is going to look like, or character is going to look like, and it really just smacks as being very odd and disconnected with what the main characters are going to look like. And for my own personal taste, and I will just chalk it up to a personal taste, I want like one weirdo character. Like in something like Saints Row, it would be funny if there's like one weirdo fat character in his white underwear running around, and he's got something crazy appearance or something like that, or maybe a punk character with large spike hair sets. But they need to be the cherry on the ice cream. They don't need to be the average character. Even in the case of the Saints still kind of needs to feel like, in this reboot as a more realistic game, it needs to feel like most of the characters are average looking and reasonable. Yeah. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And that isn't perhaps even that realistic, because most gang members do have a lot of tattoos, but I don't expect every gang member to be covered head to toe in tattoos and like look so unpresentable that they couldn't even walk into a business without being immediately kicked out. Let's see. Oddworld Soulstorm Enhanced Edition is coming to Steam, according to Gamatsu. Which I don't really know why it so quickly got an enhanced edition. It didn't really feel like it should have. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge has 11 minutes of gameplay, the original voice actors, and a physical edition announced. There's something to be said about bringing back the original voice actors all these years later for an arcade game kind of sequel. Because the original Ninja Turtles arcade game probably had them say cowabunga once, and that was it, like at the beginning of the game, and maybe make some sounds. It's hardly going to be the case that the original voice actors are going to be that recognizable based on the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game. Now, if it's the same voice actors who worked on the original Ninja Turtles cartoon, maybe that's a little bit more recognizable, but I probably wouldn't recognize it. Plus, it's just been so long. People's voices change. It seems kind of silly to bring back the original voice actors as anything other than a cheap pop. And arguably, it's nice to give older voice actors work. It's also would probably be better if more people were given opportunities to be voice actors, and younger, newer voice actors got work. Particularly in the voice acting world, there's not a lot of competition. This is very much an Irish jig that's playing now. Lego Star Wars The Skywalker sales topped 3.2 million in 2 weeks. Yeah, major success there. But personally, I'm not really feeling like I need to immediately play Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. If somebody wanted to friend me on Steam and gift me the game, that'd be great. Almost certainly, though, it would have to be the Ultimate Edition, because they're all into doing that now as far as Lego games, with tons of DLC to unlock more characters. But yeah, I would appreciate certainly playing it early, but I could also see myself just waiting. I still have a couple other Lego games to play and plenty of other games I need to finish. Ni no Kuni, I'm going to completely have forgotten what I was doing in Ni no Kuni because I was halfway through with it. Return that to the extras deck. Let's see, THQ Nordic and Nine Rock Games announced Way of the Hunter for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Seems kind of ridiculous that THQ Nordic needs to partner up, or should be partnering up with anybody, when they seem like they should be big enough to make their own games and release their own games alone, and not act as a publisher. Apparently this is featuring 2 vast open world hunting territories in the US and Europe. So this may very well be an actual hunting game, which I've often felt that the past couple decades we really haven't seen any hunting games, and I assume that was because there's just not a lot of desire to make hunting games anymore or play hunting games. I'm not sure anybody really cared about playing hunting games in the first place. Increasingly, I'm seeing more and more younger and younger people become vegans and not want to even eat meat, let alone hunt animals to potentially eat meat, or for any other kind of sport. So there definitely are people out there that do hunt, but I don't know if there's a lot of people that hunt virtually compared to people that are hunting in reality, in the real world. Even when you see this, you have what is probably the much closer to the average age of a hunter here, or somewhere between him, and then you have daughter getting dragged along, whether she likes it or not. Just like every screenshot here is pretty bad. That you run into a weird situation certainly where even though it is fairly ethical to track and hunt, and this actually looks like you actually do some tracking, looking at poop of different animals, and it's fairly ethical to do this in a virtual experience, but it's still kind of weird to virtualize the idea of hunting with no bigger game around it. Like Lara Croft in the Tomb Raider reboots, hunting deer for meat and components was fine, but not the main emphasis of the Tomb Raider reboots either. In a lot of ways, hunting is a side game mechanic that shouldn't be its own separate experience, because the more realistic you make it, probably the worse you make it as far as what your average gamer wants to see. And then you get into things like Pokemon Snap, where in a lot of ways, if you were doing just photography like Pokemon Snap, there's much more of an interesting twist to it than actually hunting Pokemon like you do. You basically are hunting Pokemon in the regular Pokemon games, at least in part when you're out in the fields. You're just capturing them instead of killing them. Also, it's worth mentioning though that Pokemon Snap is very much scripted events where you're taking photos based on a scripted scene, an event that's going to happen over and over again. Whereas if you start to put a lot of effort and production money into making artificial intelligence, where deer are just randomly acting like deer and wandering around, that becomes a lot more time intensive and less video game-ified, less gamified. So a Pokemon Snap, if you took the concepts of the new Pokemon Snap and just replaced the Pokemon with animals, that probably would be a very appealing game to me. I don't know if that's appealing to enough people to still be a game, but I think it probably is more appealing than just randomly hunting. Moving on, a 3D action RPG called Sword of Necromance Revenant has been announced for basically everything. Let's see if we can get a general idea of what it looks like. Nope. Just little screenshots so far. Still getting a decent amount of announcements. Okay, summon this. And then see if this works. I doubt anything I do here is gonna save the day. I think each name, like this one is named Increase, the one before was named Denier. So each name might mean something. Let's see, Famitsu had the sales for the 11th through the 17th, which you can see 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim for the Nintendo Switch selling very well that week compared to like Kirby and the Forgotten Lands, which, yeah, that Kirby game has been kind of forgotten about. Didn't even really think about, haven't even thought about potentially buying that or playing it. And then some other Winning Post and Battle Spirits Connected Battlers. Grand Theft Auto 5 for the PS5 doing incredibly poorly just because nobody in Japan has been able to get a PS5. As far as hardware sales, Switch still doing incredibly well compared to the PS5, which is being outsold even by the Switch Lite. And the Xbox Series X and S have never really been done. The Xbox games have never really done well at all, but I should have put that face down defense mode. But yeah, the Xboxes are doing way better than previous generations, and that has to be just because of PlayStation shortages. Like, Sony is losing sales left and right to Microsoft, which is not even really the direction I'd like to see it go. I'd much prefer the Japanese audience to move to PC gaming than just move the Xbox, but it might be a slow transition. Move a percentage of players over to the Xbox consoles this generation, next generation we start to see even more people moving to PC. Apparently the game Alice Gear Aegis CS Concerto of Simitracks has an 18-second trailer. Here you have some more moe anime girls in, I wouldn't call these mechs as much as I would call them some kind of flying armor. There's probably a better term that I'm not really familiar with. This is tagged as an action game. In a lot of ways it is a mech. It's just perhaps what you would call a new twist on a mech. Which, to get back to what I was saying previously, yeah, I don't feel like a new twist on mechs makes mechs better. Yeah, we are definitely not getting anywhere fast in this festival. Yep. And that's the shame. That's the shame with all collectible card games. Like, that's one of the things where I kind of liked about Hearthstone is that their servers were always so bad that you could get quick disconnects and people would just surrender a lot. So you could actually win even if you didn't deserve to win a lot more often, instead of most collectible card games where they rake you over the coals to win and you really have to spend a lot of time and a lot of effort. $26,000 $3,000. Let's see. Moving on with the news, the Gearbox Entertainment Company is going to acquire Lost Boys Interactive. They recently worked on Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, which definitely there is a question as to how much did Lost Boys do on Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. Did they do most of it, almost all of it, half of it? And that original Gearbox video game company, which is, I guess, now a subsidiary of Gearbox Entertainment, which recently, I think, changed their names to Gearbox Entertainment in the last year or two. Yeah, there's definitely a question as to just how much that original team still exists and is actually being allowed to do anything, or how much influence. I'm just not going to do anything. He's dead. He can't play a card. He plays a card, he'll lose. So he might as well surrender now, unless he can quickly destroy his 2 cards first. Well, so this guy, despite being an incredibly bad player, did let me get a win. A very quick win. And that may very well have been his intention, because his name does have suicide in it, so that was definitely a suicide play. You just get so much more reward when you do something like that. It's interesting that we have an effect monster as a reward. Almost always I'm getting normal rewards, but kind of pathetic. Legacy, single packs, 5 gems is definitely not a lot there. And that first victory managed to bump us up just a small amount as far as gems go. Like, we're over 1,000, and eventually we need to be over 22,000. Let's see, the House of the Dead remake is coming to basically everything. PS4, Xbox One, PC, and Stadia on April 28th. I guess that's not everything at this point. That is old generation consoles. Not new generation consoles. Maybe it's already out for new generation consoles, or maybe they're gonna not bother to release it on new generation consoles. Ultra Age for PC launches April 28th, which is what kind of game? Looks like it's a hack and slash kind of Monster Hunter clone. More action-y, I think, than what you probably would run into in Monster Hunter. Seems like you're fighting a lot of animalistic type looking games. If anything, it looks like you're fighting Zoids. One of these characters definitely looks like a Zoid. Alright. Maybe Ultra Age is the Japanese name for Zoids. Ultra Age is already available for PS4 and Switch. There is some weirdness certainly too, is it felt like only about half of the 16 gigabytes of RAM that I have installed on my computer right now full up on Wednesday, and then after streaming, looked at it again, and I was back up to almost 100% of RAM usage. So Chrome taking up the vast majority of that, to no one's surprise. But ideally, we'll get through all the news today, and then I'll be able to turn back the extensions to speed up browsing a little bit quicker, and that will not be any major problems as far as living with the RAM I have right now. There was a sale to buy some RAM, some DDR for 3600 versus maybe getting about 3200 and getting more RAM. And I considered buying it, but I didn't jump on the sale. Just was not feeling it yesterday to buy it. In part because it was a slick deals that included a 1TB NVMe SSD, which I do need a 1TB NVMe SSD, but I also need to buy a really fast one, kind of top of the line one, in that case when I do make that decision, because level loads are still heavily being affected by the NVMe SSD more than RAM speed. Oh, it's a delicate balance certainly with the two. Moving on, Yuri Killed the Culmination Games has a demo for the PS5, PS4, and Switch launching April 28th in Japan. Which I suspect this Yuri Kill Culmination game might be one that gets talked about a lot more than people would think. Honkai Star Rail, which apparently is for PC and smartphones, has a March 7th trailer. Which... Yeah, normally if I wasn't so far behind, I would pay more attention to these trailers. This is interesting because it seems like you're just kind of following this girl taking photos. But I suspect that's probably the very beginning of the story, and then she moves over to doing her standard RPG stuff. That and that one. And then summon. The trailer does seem to indicate that she may use her camera throughout the course of the game. And she does look like she is a interesting character. But if it's a turn-based strategy RPG for smartphones and PC, I wouldn't be surprised if Honkai Star Rail is a pretty simplistic game. I assume Honkai Star Rail is connected to Honkai Impact, but maybe not. I think it is. It's from MiHoYo as the company, and so I would think that would be the one. I think I may have lost there. Unless I get a defusion or something. I don't know what the word Honkai means. So it could be a generic word, or it could be something else. Kimatsu has more information about Honkai Star Rail from earlier posts. And seems like in this one there's actually 3 characters that they were focused on. Problem with all these mobile games though is that they want to be these JRPGs, and you're seeing how JRPGs are just moving to mobile games instead of being PlayStation games first. But that just feels like you'd have to have a really long commute to make sense to play a JRPG on a cell phone. And in Japan, you probably do have a fairly long commute. In the West, not so much. Moving on, Siphon Filter 1 and 2, Dark Mirror, and Logan Shadow, rated for PS5 and PS4 in Korea. Likely set to join the upcoming PlayStation Plus Premium tier. All of those games are Siphon Filter's games. And we kind of had already talked about them. But also they are games I don't really recognize. And I'm starting to see a lot more games that I've never heard of coming back from obscurity as ways of just trying to breathe new life into old products, or breathe life into subscription services. Fire Dragon Fist Master Zhao Mei for Switch launches May 19th in Japan, which is kind of a different art style. What is it as an actual game look like, I wonder? Because that's probably just a thumbnail. Yep. It's a really old NES game that they're porting. This again is one of those cases of like a game that could do for a brief remake, remaster, reboot. Like, there may not be a ton of stuff you can really do, but just taking the general characters and the general concept and bringing it to a modern sensibility makes a lot more sense than porting it if it didn't cost any money to make a new game. But since it does cost money to make a new game, it's not super surprising that that they are just porting it for. But yeah, a couple of ninja girls and some other characters. Ninja girls in Chinese dresses is like that visually can be the start of something appealing, certainly. Them having enemies and beating up enemies is a very basic tenet of almost any game, so that would work fairly well too. Frightful Fusion. Let's see how this works. Let's see. Sega Genesis, Nintendo Switch Online adds Shining Force 2, Sonic the Hedgehog Spinball, and Space Harrier 2. Seems really weird to very quickly get Sonic Spinball and then have Sonic Origins remove older versions of Sonic games, including, I think, Sonic Spinball, and reselling it. It just kind of highlights that there's no major plan there. It's just to get as much money as possible from the it's just to get as much money from old Sega fanboys as possible. Alright. Well, we've got something there. What's his effect going to do? Well, I don't completely know what happened there, but that turned out to work for me. Let's see, Guilty Gear Strive, a DLC Another Story, launches April 29th, which the Guilty Gear series, I believe, is a fighting series, and does catch my attention every now and then for being a little bit different looking. I could see a future where we see a very limited amount of Western fighting games coming out for the next 5 to 10 years. I wouldn't be surprised if there isn't any big fanfare for another Mortal Kombat or an Injustice, and we start to see fighting games move back to being more focused as Japanese fighting games, Japanese companies making fighting games. We have somebody called Colby Mann on the chat saying, "Hey, how are you? Sorry if it took me a while to respond to you. How am I? I'm alright. I'm not doing particularly great. It's very hot where I am, and I'm not accomplishing anywhere as much as I would like to in the past couple of weeks, as far as making YouTube footage or just accomplishing other things in life. So I'm kind of embracing a forced vacation in this summer, and probably should take off every summer as just a month-long vacation of some, or semi-vacation. I still probably would live stream during the summer, and pre-recorded footage would still air during the summer. But Colby asks who I'm dueling. I can tell you the person I'm dueling is V Zeta. That's as much as I can tell you. It's just a random person for the Fusion Festival. I'm just trying to get the Fusion Festival done as I burn through video game news that I'm trying to catch up from 2 weeks ago. We had already talked about this one from Gamatsu. Well, it was talked about by other people too. The new Tales from the Borderlands is going to be announced this summer. Now, what's funny is I feel like you would kind of fail fairly miserably if you made a Tales from the Borderlands game and you didn't really still focus on the characters that existed in Tales from the Borderlands. If you tried to introduce new characters, or if you drastically shifted away from those characters, I think that would be a mistake. Certainly. Return this to the deck. And let's change this defense to defense position. I gotta figure out a way to kill this guy if I'm gonna win. Let's see, the roguelite platformer Eyes in the Dark, The Curious Case of One Victoria Bloom, has been announced for PC. This looks interesting. These different art styles often do. This feels... this might be from the same developer as PJ Winterbottom, but maybe not. The art style just seems somewhat similar. The problem with something like this, though, is that with a black and white aesthetic, you can run into a case where everything is just a little too dark, And it seems like you've got almost like a Metroidvania game where you're playing with shadow and light way more than might be comfortable. So something like this could work, or it could turn out to be kind of a nightmare visually. Anything I do here is going to probably end up with me losing. Let's see, Gearbox Publishing is going to publish a free-to-play top-down looter shooter called Relic Hunters Legend for PC, which really feels like they're cannibalizing their own looter shooter games. Like, how many looter shooters do they think people really are going to play in a year? Like, it would totally make a lot more sense to have completely different non-shooting games be published by Gearbox Publishing. On the other hand, a top-down Borderlands game with the same kind of concept of having bazillions of guns or billions of guns that are procedurally generated, that code, that procedural loot generation code, could easily be copied and pasted to a top-down twin-stick shooter. But at a certain point, why not just call that Borderlands something else? Why not just call everything Borderlands and have an entire Borderlands franchise instead of a completely different game called Relic Hunters? And even at that, Relic Hunters could have been named Vault Hunters. Same concept, put it in the Borderlands universe. But I suppose since they're just publishing it, they probably didn't want to include something that could end up not being owned by Gearbox, and publishers sometimes own the rights to games and often don't own the rights to games. Let's see. Outriders expansion World Slayer launches June 30th. I feel like Outriders is one of these games that has been criminally ignored and should have been more successful. But I guess in part the problem there is you've got Square Enix as the publisher and People Can Fly as the developer, and People Can Fly has not managed to make a really great name for their company or put out enough products for as long as they've been out in existence. A game called Cloud Gardens is coming to the Switch on May 12th, which I assume is mostly going to be some kind of gardening game. If not that, it's going to be some kind of hidden object game. Definitely feels like it's a weirder take on gardening too, in that it is a kind of overgrown apocalyptic world. It seems like more than just starting from scratch and gardening. But that might lead to a better gameplay concept than your standard. You're going to press a button to plant something, then you're going to press a button to water something, then you're going to wait. Pruning things already grown probably is more close to a hack and slash game and thus more recognizable to gamers than just waiting for something to grow. Let's see, F1 2022 has been, or 22 has been announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and PC, due out on July 1st. Not particularly interested in that. Astergos Curse of the Stars launches this fall, and it's a Xbox Series and Xbox One version. This looks like this might be an interesting, like, mid-tier game. The visuals don't look quite good enough to make me think of it as a AAA game. In a lot of ways, you just don't see a lot of mid-tier games that aren't trying for hyper-realistic graphics and are trying to do something a little bit different. Yeah. As a game, looking at this trailer, there might be something to this. Certainly, if you needed to have this level of graphics to release the next Elder Scrolls Skyrim game in a reasonable amount of time, they should have done that. Because otherwise you run into the problem of just nothing ever getting released. Which, notably, Redfall and Starlink have been delayed. Even though Microsoft now owns Bethesda, we are still running into problems of delays at Bethesda. And at a certain point that Microsoft is going to have to start putting its foot down and require people to actually release games, require the companies that they've acquired to actually release games. Yeah, all of this would work a lot better if I wasn't just about to lose everything. If I could XYZ summon these. Let's see. Where's my mouse cursor? There it is. Sherlock Holmes Chapter 1 for PS4 launches April 28th. The Xbox One version has been cancelled. This was the one that was cancelled because of the invasion of Ukraine. I always want to see a Sherlock Holmes game succeed, but they never feel like they quite put enough polish into them, enough effort into them to make them succeed. Again, I hope I'm wrong about the latest one, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's mediocre at best. Let's see, Marvelous has announced a survival action game, Deadcraft, for basically everything. What's interesting here is apparently he has a magical mutant arm. We haven't seen a lot of zombie games lately. Like, we may be finally getting away from the overabundance of zombie games that has plagued gamers for decades. Even the survival games have become fairly minimal. We're not seeing a lot of Minecraft clones either. The pandemic, I think, really helped a lot of companies give up the ghost as far as just trying to make a cheap buck by copying someone else. It doesn't feel like we're getting much, if any, cliched type games. Alright, let's then duel with this deck, since it doesn't matter if you actually play with a fusion deck or not. I bet I possibly should just duel with the Zodiac deck and learn how to play that deck better. Let's see, Colonia Fantasy Reverie series for basically everything launches July 7th in Japan and July 8th worldwide. This is a adventure series. One that I think came out for the Wii, but I definitely don't remember it. We are still kind of having a problem with a lot of games getting remakes or remasters and it not being really advertised as a remake or remaster. So, for instance, if you've never heard of Koa the Kangaroo, you might think that's a brand new game instead of just a port. Anyways, it launches May 27th. I suspect an actual remaster, not a new game. There definitely is also a push to bring back some of those early first generation 3D platforming adventure games for kids. And maybe that is in part because of the success of the Switch, or it's just because there's a bunch of them and they're kind of easy to port. MX vs. ATV Legends has been delayed to June 8th. Not that interested. Diablo Immortal launches June 2nd for iOS, Android, and PC in open beta. Still not 100% sure if the storyline of Diablo Immortal is different. The gameplay definitely looks different, but if you told me it was the same storyline from the first game, it says it's a brand new story taking place between the events of Diablo 2 and Diablo 3. So it's not going through the storyline of Diablo 1, which arguably you should just make a mobile game that goes through the storyline of Diablo 1. It would make a decent amount of sense. The Diablo 3 engine, the Diablo 4 engine, as they're working on Diablo 4, almost certainly would improve the experience of playing Diablo 1. Moving on, Gran Turismo 7 version 1.13 update is now available if you're interested in that. Yeah, if you had new features from Diablo 3 or 4 added to Diablo 1 too, you would also have a very different experience. One Piece Odyssey screenshots, story, monsters, and ruins are shown here. Here we have Monkey D. Luffy being shown in the back, and then the two main female protagonists of a very large group of characters, cast of characters in the One Piece world. They're arguably not being animated in ways I've seen before. I don't think the anime, long-running manga or anime quite looks like this. It's very similar. It's worth mentioning, certainly, though, that there was a One Piece game that was released as a fighting game or an adventure game less than 3 years ago, and it was very quickly abandoned and given up on and removed from sale, I think. Maybe it's still available for sale. I don't think it is, though. So it's kind of a history of Bandai Namco trying to make video games based on Bandai anime properties and not putting a lot of effort into it and turning out pretty badly. They also have this week's Japanese game releases with Nintendo Switch Sports, Hisho Same Same Same, and more. I saw DF Retro talk about Nintendo Switch Sports, and they weren't super hot on it, but I don't think they particularly had anything to hate on either, so I don't think that there's a major emphasis or a major reason why you would want to get into the Switch sports as soon as possible. You could probably wait till you get a used copy and save a few bucks, unless you just love Wii bowling. It's not even really a finished game because they're going to try and add more content via downloads and updates later. And clearly, had Nintendo Switch Sports come out on day one with the Switch, when everybody had to be using Joy-Cons before the Switch Lite came out, it would make a lot more sense, because you cannot play the game without Joy-Cons, and Joy-Cons are not included. As far as other games that were released that week, Good Girls 2 Civil War. Let's see what happens when I click on that. Several other games, looks like visual novels. So this was a pretty big week as far as physical games. And then when you get down to like digital, the digital releases are always huge. Good Girls 2 Civil War doesn't seem to have too much to say around it. Yeah, let's click this article. Yep. Anime Moe Girls. That's about all they have to say about it. If anything, that's a almost opposite example of how most Japanese games are advertised, with just like one Gamatsu article. Ubisoft is developing a team-based battle arena game called Project Q for basically everything as a Fortnite competitor. Visually, I don't see anything here grabbing my attention to start with, but I don't know what you really could even do to grab my attention as far as a team-based battle arena game. Let's see, Oita Beppu Mystery Guide, The Warped Bamboo Lantern, announced for Switch and other platforms. This almost certainly is an old game being ported, like an old NES mystery story game. Yeah. And that, I would suspect, is never coming to the West. Little Witch in the Woods for PC launches early access on May 16th. Which, okay, I'll be interested to see more bits of news about that game. The PlayStation Plus 3-tiered service launch is set for May 23rd in Asia, June 1st in Japan, June 13th in America, and June 22nd in Europe. Sounds like a very staggered release for no good reason. Dying Light 2 Stay Human sales have topped 5 million in a month, whereas Dying Light 1 has topped 20 million sales. So I don't think you can call Dying Light 2 a failure by any means. It's just kind of, much like most games these days, it seems like enthusiasm quickly drops off after the first couple of days, and then there's just nobody really talking about the games. Although that may just be my perception, as I'm just probably not listening to the right people or talking with the right people. The only game I really have recognized that it seems like there are real gamers who really are enthusiastic about it is Elden Ring. That's the only one that's really maintained any attention. This guy's just gonna win here. 2 Points Campus Wizardry Course reveal trailer and screenshots. Being a Harry Potter themed DLC. I assume it's DLC. Echoes of Mana launches April 27th. for smartphones. This is another, I assume, Square Enix cell phone port of or cell phone spin-off. Yep. Being published by Square Enix. And this trailer, I suspect, won't even bother to show you what the game actually looks like. Instead, it will just show you a very pretty cutscene and try to be deceptive about what the actual game would look like. In reality, Echoes of Mana is almost certainly, as a mobile game, going to look way, way worse than the screenshot and trailer does. They're even kind of saying it by saying that this is an animated trailer produced by Madhouse, Madhouse being a recognizable name amongst animation and not a game developer. Let's see. Let's try the Zodiac Tri Brigade. Yeah, it's gonna be too much work. So I still kind of feel like it is safer just to play with my fusion deck. I mean, the deck I'm playing with right now, whatever that's called, the World Reaver deck, than it is to try and play a loner deck. Control this. Summon this. Activate this. And take one of those. Then in the turn. Oops, I could have attacked that. Let's see. Splatoon 3 launches September 9th. We talked about this on Wednesday. I hope people are enthusiastic about Splatoon 3, but also I'm probably not going to bother to play it, in part because I don't want to play online with people, or mostly because I don't want to play online with people. Let's see. Chained Echoes launches Q4 for the PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. This is a turn-based RPG. Yep. And it just looks like an RPG to me. Nothing particularly that good looking. And not from any real names I recognize. Focus Entertainment, I recognize. Deck 13, I don't. So all just kind of feels very generic. Now, ideally, we'll get through all the Gamatsu news today, and then over the weekend, I'll potentially be able to go through most, if not all, of the games that came out over the past 2 weeks on Steam. And that will leave me perfectly set up to mostly be caught up by Monday. Of course, I didn't run my macro at all this week to look for new news, so any news that happened this week is going to be probably covered on Monday. But I don't suspect that there will be that much anyways. activate Ascending Soul to get that back. Go ahead and draw a card. Go ahead and you can activate a trap. These will all just give us rewards. Let's see, here we have a game called Soul Hackers 2 Milady trailer, which I assume Milady is the name of the character. What kind of game is this? Turn-based RPG, action RPG. Well, the trailer is definitely not explaining that one. I think it's probably a turn-based RPG. Yep, it says it's just an RPG from Atlas. Soul Hackers may be part of the Persona series in part, which is part of the Shin Megami Tensei series in part. Let's see. The romance visual novel Senran Banka, 1,000 Colors of Love, is coming to the Switch on May 26th in Japan. Which, okay. Summon that. Activate that. Go ahead and activate that one. Bring that back. I can't activate Ascending Soul. So let's draw another card and see if that works for us. Nope. Doesn't matter, we're gonna win anyways. So if you do this one, then that one, that's the most amount of damage you can do. Not that there's a ton of difference in doing a lot of damage. Because you have to do over 3,000 damage. We've got a Beaver Warrior. Slowly, ever so slowly, we're earning medals. We have the Famitsu review scores for issue 1743, which gave House of Dead Remake 29 out of 40, pretty low. Research and Destroy 32 out of 40. Samurai Bringer 34 out of 40, that's pretty high. And then Star Wars The Force Unleashed for Switch 29 out of 40, which I suspect The Force Unleashed on the Switch either doesn't control particularly well, or it being a port of a rather old game just does not really appeal to modern Famitsu reviewers. Let's see. Devil May Cry 5 apparently has topped 5 million in sales. I assume we'll get a Devil May Cry 6 announcement in the next couple of years. I don't see a real reason why it wouldn't get an update. Sifu has free updates roadmap announced. The first of 4 major updates is due out on May 3rd. Yes, if these are all free, there's nothing really to complain about this other than the game is basically released in an unfinished form. Like, apparently there weren't even difficulty options originally. That's kind of ridiculous. Oh no. Well, I just lost that guy. I still could potentially get something from that. But yeah, Sifu probably deserves a little bit more success than it got, but probably not much more than it, not a lot more. Call of the Sea developer Out of the Blue Games has announced a puzzle platformer called American Arcadia for consoles and PC. Which, looks more like a point-and-click adventure game to me than anything. Yeah, and I feel like this game may have already even come out on Steam, because I feel like I've seen it on Steam. There's a report that time-limited game trials now are a requirement for PlayStation games priced $34 or higher at wholesale. With an update too, we've pretty much confirmed at this point that that is the case. But basically, it seems like they are just doing the same 2-hour trial limit that is on Steam already. If they're making specifically what they think is 2 hours worth of gameplay and eliminating the second act, the third act, the fourth act of a game, that's all apparently going to be handled by Sony. Let's see, a game called Floppy Nights launches May 24th, which this looks like it's a card-based, maybe tower defense game. See if we can kind of figure out how this plays. Card-based positional placement tactical game, I guess. Not so much a tower defense. Floppy Nights doesn't look awful. It's definitely a game that I may never bother to play, but it doesn't look as terrible as it could be. Let's see, a Legend of Mana, the Teardrop Crystal teaser trailer and key visuals. But this is actually an anime that's going to air in 2022 based on the Legend of Mana series, or the Mana series. So yeah, this can be a lot more colorful with its visuals because there's not actually a game around it. Yeah. From Warner Brothers, I better not show the trailer at that point. Let's see. My Dearest invites fans to choose which of the 3 virtual reality multiplayer games it develops next, which at a certain point, that means they have no idea and no strong leadership. So the options are Code Camp, an open world cooperative camping fasting games, Code Gauntlet, an action multiplayer online battle arena, and Code Bell, a 4 versus 1 survival game. And they apparently have made trailers for each of these games. VR feels pretty dead at this point, too. But yeah, it seems very ridiculous that you don't have leadership saying make this game because I know that this is going to be the best seller. Yeah, still can't do anything, can I? Let's see. Soul Hackers 2 Summoner's Guide Volume 2 video is out if you want to check that out. Let's see. Ninja Jaja Maru. The Great Yokai Battle plus Hell for PC launches May 12th alongside the version 2.0 for PS4 and Switch. So it's getting a PC port. And it kind of looks like an old NES game. Perhaps with some more modern, brutal controls around it. I'm gonna lose here. Monochrome Mobius Rights and Wrongs Forgotten launches September 8th for PS5 and PS4 in Japan and PC worldwide. Which that's an interesting twist, certainly, to make a what I assume is a visual novel and then release a PC version worldwide and the console versions domestically. Doesn't really even look like a visual novel. If anything, it looks like an RPG game. And kind of a decent looking RPG game. So unless that title is wrong, and the PS4, PS5s are also being released worldwide, it would be very interesting if all of a sudden we started to see cases where in Japan you get PlayStation versions of games. But outside of Japan, you don't get PlayStation versions of games, as is, it seems, the case for this game. Because that would mean that even negotiations are somehow drastically different when you, depending on whether you're dealing with the Sony of Japan versus Sony of California offices. Yeah, I just saw another black flash, which does make me suspect that even with my old video card plugged in, there's something wrong going on here, but I don't know. I need to see something more than just some black flashing. Before I pull the trigger and just determine that every single component of my PC has been short-circuited and there's no recovering it, and I just need to build a total brand new computer. Let's see, moving on. The Super Mario Brothers animated film has been delayed to April 7th. We'd already talked about this. I will say there is something kind of about the way things go in Mario Odyssey that gives more of a character and personality to Princess Peach that also kind of makes her not the Princess Peach we've known up until this point. Like, she is habitually always getting kidnapped by Bowser, so that is her archetype. That is what happens to her, and then she's missing for the vast majority of the game. If you try to make her a strong, independent woman, it doesn't really work, simply for the case that she, as a character, has not been in the past a strong, independent woman. She's been the damsel in distress. She is the archetype of the damsel in distress. So when you bring her into an animated movie, you have to be kind of careful to not make her as a character or any of the characters feel unauthentic. Because there might be a pushback to that. Certainly. It would be very weird and probably rejected if you went in to watch a Mario movie, Mario was barely in the movie, and it was all about Princess Peach instead. And while that might be a funny gimmick if there had been a consistent history of Mario movies, to have the third, fourth movie in the series that way, the first Mario movie in decades really needs to be very kid-friendly and very traditional. Like, for the most part, you should walk into a Mario movie expecting, knowing exactly what to expect and knowing exactly what you're going to see. Alright, let's see how this works. Okay. Special summon this one. Getting rid of that. See how this goes. Moving on with the news, we had already talked about the PlayStation 5 variable refresh rate support software coming out for some games, not all games. Disney Speedstorm was confirmed for the PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC due out this summer. Yep. This certainly, a Disney Mario Kart clone, certainly spits in the face of them, Fox making a Family Guy and American Dad Mario Kart clone, which they are also doing that. But yeah, I don't know what they thought they were going to accomplish there. There almost certainly was always going to be better characters to use, and instead of that animation domination, if that's what they block, which if that's not even really, I imagine, American Dad, because American Dad's not airing or making new episodes, I don't believe. And King of the Hill is definitely not making episodes, and it never was in the animation domination block either. Fox as a TV station is dumb, to say the least. Just never never really capable of keeping successful shows outside of Simpsons and Family Guys. They cancel pretty much everything else. A Disney Mario Kart clone should work fairly well. There's really no reason why it shouldn't work, in my mind. The Legends of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel 1 through 4 and Trails into Reverie complete box for PS4 launches July 28th. That's a lot of games. A lot of games that I believe are all fairly long-running Japanese RPGs. So I'd really have to question whether there's that many people that would be buying this box set to actually play all the games, as much as people are just buying the box set out of fandom and collectability. I don't feel like these games, the Legend of Heroes games, are that new to the point where you might think that they are games released year after year, and so it's just been 5 years, and that's why there are 5 of them. But that might be the case. Summon that, tributing that one. Go ahead and destroy that. Darn it. Well, this may take longer, but I'll still win in the long run. Let's see, Honkai Star Rail second closed beta test signups are now available. This is old news, almost certainly. River City Saga 3 Kingdoms for the PS4 or PC launches July 21st in Japan. I assume this is part of the River City series, of which the River City Girls games are about the only ones I'm super interested in playing. But yeah, the River City series is kind of a great example of a series that is a beat 'em up type game that, with new modern graphics, still was able to be a little relevant. Bring this guy back. Try this again while I'm actually trying to play. These are ritual summon monsters. So we bring him on the field. He should let us destroy anything face up, but not that card. So that doesn't work. Let's see, Maglam Lord is coming to PC on May 30th, which I don't know what kind of game it is. It says it's an action RPG, so I'd assume that's true. Supernatural detective noir visual novel Meteor World Actor Badger and Dagger launching June 10th in the West. Okay, we have a bit of a trailer for this visual novel. Like, it almost doesn't matter what the trailer shows you because actual visual novel is not going to look much like it at all. Looks like it might have a slightly different type of story. Deathverse Let It Die second developer diary features the composer Akira Yamaoka. Yep. It's not really video game related, but apparently one of the famous animators, like one of the famous animators of Doraemon, the animator of Doraemon, which is a famous Japanese kids cartoon, was a kind of like professional level Arkanoid player, but she's developed like dementia and old age or something, and so she's no longer even able to beat Arkanoid, which is a sad story, certainly. I mean, it's not very newsworthy. Old people aren't typically, that does happen to old people, is that they lose their skills and abilities. But yeah, it definitely sucks from the concept of a gamer to know that there are things that can happen to take away your ability to enjoy the things you once enjoyed in your past. Let's see. Wow, that was a lot of time to lose. That was definitely a lot of time to spend just to lose. Let's go back to the menu. Yeah, we're approaching the 3-hour mark, and I think at this point I probably do want to just call it a day. We're at 4,130 gems, and this is going to once again show just how ridiculous it is that you get maxed out at 10,000 gems. We have 19 of these done already. So first one's completely done. Special summoning monsters, we need to do that 7 more times. Normal summoning monsters, we need to do that 17 more times. Destroying a card, we need to do that 19 more times. We have a new spectate, duel live. We have all kinds of ranked duels, so I need to play ranked too. So that was like 700 gems. You would like to see a pause on the ranked duels when there's a festival happening, the daily ranked duels, in favor of just getting daily quests to play the festivals instead. Let's see, an open world adventure game called Aka launches Q4 for Switch and PC. Is there anything more they have to show? There might be something to this. Open world adventures are kind of odd contradictions, I suppose. Like, an adventure probably shouldn't be that open world. Even Breath of the Wild, I think, probably would have been better if it was less open world and more of a standard adventure. Although, in all fairness, every Zelda game, starting with the first one, has had a kind of major element of an open world. It's just whether or not the previous Zelda games tended to have a lot of dungeons, and the dungeons then made it very linear compared to compared to just like the big grass field in the middle of Ocarina of Time, where you could call that an open world, but you really didn't do anything with it. If this works. Yeah, I'm starting to get sleepy. Losing steam. Now can we special summon something a little bit better? 1700. It's actually not any better. We'll go ahead and summon it now. That way you have a little bit more protection. Need to burn through this news. This War of Mine Final Cut is coming to PS5 and Xbox Series on May 10th, according to Komatsu. PlayStation Plus free games for May 2022 announced. I think we've already covered that. A third-person shooter Glitch Buster Stuck on You has been announced for PS4, Switch, and PC, which looks kind of like a meme troll game more than anything. Maybe there is an actual game there, but it doesn't look like it. A mystery visual novel called Mothman 1966 is coming out for PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC July 14th. Which there might be something interesting there. Ace Combat 7 Skies Unknown has a Top Gun Maverick collaboration DLC being announced. Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader has been announced for PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC, due out in 2022. And yeah, they've gotten rid of like the Jeff Foxworthy host and gone for just generic CG characters, which is fine. I don't feel like this show is still on TV. If it is, it's running on some weird channel. Let's see, Fallen Legion Rise to Glory, Fallen Legion Revenants launches August 23rd in North America and August 26th in Europe. Looks to be kind of a beat 'em up game. There's maybe some card mechanics. Interesting art style. Very skinny, like hip here, super stretched out and skinny, and then this guy's pretty skinny looking too. Yeah, they say it's an action RPG. A free-to-play life simulator adventure game called Disney Dreamlight Valley has been announced for basically everything. This could be very interesting when it comes out, or it could be nothing. It could be a kind of low effort Stardew Valley with a whole bunch of microtransactions. I'm hoping the people in charge of this really do a good job, but I wouldn't hold my breath that they do a good job with it. I wouldn't hold my breath that it succeeds, and I wouldn't hold my breath that it stays around for that long. So even if you got really into it, it may be shut down potentially a year later, 2 years later. Let's see, an unannounced class of hero quests rated in Korea. So maybe there's a new game for class of heroes. Not to be confused with Clash of Heroes. I've never heard of a Class of Heroes game before. Let's see. We pretty much covered this to death. Yuji Naka was removed from as Balan Wonderworld's director half a year before its release. Claims the game was unfinished. I agree that it was unfinished. I assume it's true that he was released half a year before. I'm not sure he would have done any better though. Endless Dungeon Bunker Hero reveal trailer. This looks like it is some kind of roguelite of really no interest. I don't know why you'd just want to look at or play a robot that's so generic looking. Xbox and Bethesda Game Showcase for 2022 is set for June 12th. I don't believe they ever said how long it was going to run, though. Tales of Arise shipments and digital sales have topped 2 million, so definitely some success there. The Famitsu sales numbers have been updated. eBaseball Powerful Pro taking the first and second spot that week over Kirby the Forgotten Land by far. So eBaseball apparently still very popular and successful in Japan, which I'm not super surprised about that. Hyperdimension Neptunia for PS4 taking the 8th spot as a new game. That's not terrible. Hoku and Rocky Reshrine taking the 10th spot. Some of these other games, though, definitely not doing great in their sales. And then, yeah, Switch Lite selling less than the PlayStation 5 that week. But PlayStation 5 still selling way less than Switch and Switch OLED models combined. And the Xbox Series S selling way better than the Series X. Week to week, it definitely feels like it is just what is in stock affects how much things sell versus anything else. R-Type Tactics 1 and 2 remakes have been announced, which I don't know how much you really need to remake R-Type Tactics. Maybe R-Type Tactics is a different game than what I'm thinking of. This guy is taking forever. A Metroidvania shoot 'em up, The Night Witch, has been announced for basically everything. Which, okay. There might be something to this. Metroidvania shoot 'em ups are an odd combination of two styles of games. Taken 2, Ridge Racers 2, and Mr. Driller appear in the PlayStation Network's backend. Worms World Party and Worms Armageddon also. So, some older games showing up in the backend. That's really not very actionable news, though. A game called XO1 is coming to PS5 and PS4 this summer. It's apparently an adventure simulation game. Seems like it's basically a ball rolling physics game. Don't know if there's really enough there to be interested in. This guy is still taking forever. See, Persona Super Live P Soundwish 2022 Crossing Journey concert set for October 8th and 9th. This is obviously just going to be a concert based on Persona music in Japan, which is almost an announcement that there will be no new announcement of anything Persona related before then. Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak expansion digital event set for May 10th. So we're slowly getting caught up. The Quintessential Quintuplets, the movie, 5 Memories of My Time with You, second trailer. What's funny is that this is a video game and yet it's called, it's labeled as a movie. I believe there is an anime around this where it's one guy, eventually he marries one of these quintuplets, but as far as I understood, he really only shows any interest in one quintuplet, and only one quintuplet shows any interest in him. So there's not like there's a big mystery, even though they pretend like there's a big mystery as to which one he ends up marrying. I would lean to saying if at all possible, multiples should heavily consider dating other multiples. Twins dating twins, quintuplets dating quintuplets, or quintuplets dating twins, at least, because there's just such a difference in as far as how multiples end up acting and being raised that only other multiples even begin to understand it. Which is weird, because you certainly could you could have like two kids about the same age or exactly the same age. You could adopt two kids that are exactly the same age, and you just don't have that feeling as much as twins. And it very well may be 100% nurture instead of nature, because as soon as you tell somebody's twins, as soon as you see that somebody looks similar to you, that may just lead to different ways people think and act. And a lot of twins I've certainly seen tend to be pretty childish and a little weird, and it's something you definitely should be careful of if you end up having multiples or twins, and not embrace it. Don't dress the kids the same until the age of 18. Things like that. Let's see. RPG Maker Unite details its outline editor, which I really don't want to see more RPG Maker software. So, nor do I care to ever use RPG Maker software. There's been way too many bad RPG games because of RPG Maker, and not very many good RPG games because of it. Let's see, The Legend of Heroes Kuro no Kisekai is coming to PS5 on July 28th in Japan, Asia, and PC in Asia. So not really bothering to release it in the West, though. Which, it may come out in the West at some point, or you may be very easy to just port it and patch it. We want to see that stop being the case, though. I really don't want to have to import games at a high price and then find some shady patch that would promise to add English subtitles. Sorry, went silent there as I'm trying to pick up the remote for my chair so I can put the legs down since it's all electric. Yeah. On the other hand, it may increasingly become a case that when you have more Japanese-centric or Japanese-focused games, importing it and fan patching to English is the only way to really go, because if there is a English localization, the English localizations are sometimes really censored and totally mistranslated, and that has been the case in the past, particularly in some of the Japanese, the Nintendo games, where they have just actively added crazy SJW propaganda when none of that ever existed, and they weren't even talking about the same subject, or where they have censored things just because they felt the need to censor things. And yeah, often there's not enough fans to make an outcry or a boycott on something that was being localized and released in the West anyways. Let's see. Moving on, Takokomon Kozatsu World is now available via Steam. This, I believe, is a side-scrolling game, is what they're saying it is. Is this a side-scrolling shoot 'em up? And not quite. It's a side-scrolling beat 'em up. Yeah. There might be something to that when I eventually get around to playing it. It's a Toho Project Bullet Hell action game. Still have yet to figure out what the Toho Project really is. Seems to be basically one company making a whole bunch of games under the Toho Project label, and then a few other people being allowed to also make games under the Toho Project label. Next story, Toho Project real-time strategy game, the Toho Empire, is announced for PC. I wouldn't also be surprised if, and obviously you're going to get multiple announcements of Toho Project games because they're being made by the same person or the same publisher. A game called Thymesia launches August 9th. It's an action RPG with fast-paced combat, apparently. This is from Team 17 publisher, at least. I'm trying to burn through this real fast. ActRaiser Renaissance version 1.10 update is now available. This looks like a tower defense game. Yeah, I'm about to lose. They're actually calling it a side-scrolling platformer simulation game, which that does not make a lot of sense. I guess that's what it is, though. Actually, I wouldn't be surprised, now I think about it, that ActRaiser sounds like that might have been an old arcade game. This kind of looks like an old arcade game. You're hacking and slashing. Alright, well, I think that's going to be it for today. As far as playing ranked, and I'll just have to play more off screen. But obviously, I need to burn through a couple of these in the next couple days. Get the daily missions done, and I need to play a ton for the Fusion Festival. Just try to really burn through this news. We'd already talked about Embracer Group acquiring Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal, and Square Enix Montreal. AI, the Somnium Files Nirvana initiative details dual stories, new investigation elements, and new characters if you want to check that out. Apparently, this is a murder mystery game. Didn't realize that's what it was. Yeah. Interesting. I'm not going to scroll through all that. Bandai Namco trademarks G Generation Eternal in Japan. Square Enix trademarks Relic Strike. That's been apparently updated. It's just talking about trademarks. Xbox Live Gold free games for May 2022 were shown off. We probably had already talked about that. Vesper Zero Light Edition has been announced for Switch, which is some kind of side-scrolling platformer. Yep, this is another one of those games that's set in black and white, and that can be particularly dangerous, as I was saying earlier. Earth Defense Force 6 launches August 25th in Japan. I assume it is going to actually come out in the West, but I'm not really expecting it to be that great. Interesting, you have a lot of crossover. Here's Oni-Chanbara crossovers and little chibi figurines. This is Oni-Chanbara crossover also. I believe I wouldn't be surprised if the makers of Earth Defense Force is also the same company that made Oni-Chanbara. That makes sense. Final Fantasy 16 development is in the final stretch, according to the producer. Grim Grimoire once more has a second trailer. It's an RPG of some sort. They say it's an RPG. This is kind of like a tiny tower game. Come to think, yeah, I remember this now. Yeah, hopefully I'm starting to really learn and remember some of this information, and this isn't just all in one ear and out the other. Komajo Remilia Scarlet Symphony has a debut trailer, which it's also a side-scrolling action game. Castlevania clones. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see a decent amount of Castlevania clones, considering how the creator of Castlevania was successful making a Castlevania clone. Yeah. Yeah. It's probably a little easier to make a Castlevania clone while you're running around a castle from that art style and that perspective than it is to make an open world game or multiple dungeons. Quasi 3D action RPG Toho Shoujo Tale of Beautiful Memories is coming to Switch. I assume this is another Toho project. River City Saga 3 Kingdoms is coming to the West on July 21st. The Elder Souls large-scale updates, Depths of the Forgotten, is now available. I don't think I recognize a game called The Elder Souls. A roguelike platformer, Falling Out, has been announced for console and PC. A roguelike platformer. Yeah, it doesn't quite feel like the kind of game I would want to play, but kind of depends how it plays too. If this is fairly easy to control, I might be cool with it, but if it's like Spelunky, which it looks a lot like Spelunky, and it's really difficult, then that's too much for me. And it seems odd you have these two characters in bathing suits and kind of a heavy focus on swimming, which Spelunky with swimming is, I guess, something. Let's see, PlayStation Now adds Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Storm 4, Soul Calibur 6, and Blasphemous. Blasphemous being, yeah, kind of a weird one to give away for free just because of the name. Let's see, Toho Goyoku Ibun, I'm not going to try to pronounce the rest of that, is coming to the Switch this fall in Japan. Yet another Toho game. I have about, I guess, 40 tabs if we can burn through them fairly quickly. Xbox Game Pass added several games, including Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair Anniversary Edition, which seems a little premature to release that, but whatever. Redout 2 launches May 26. Fury is coming to the PS5 alongside the DLC Onimusha and a free update on May 17th. So it kind of feels like that's just a skin difference instead of a character that might play difference. Otherwise, Fury as a game, I definitely want to get around to playing it at some point, but it's kind of lost its relevancy. I don't think they're going to make a sequel or a spiritual sequel, and if they do, it's going to be a little too late at this point. They should have announced that a couple months ago at minimum. Trek to Yomi has a launch trailer, which we're starting to have maybe one too many of these highly stylized Japanese samurai games to the point where it's going to start getting a little difficult to remember whether you're talking about Trek to Yomi or Ghost of Tsushima. There's, I think, 2 or 3 others that I couldn't even bother to name. Sniper Elite 5 has a features trailer. I don't feel like the Sniper Elite game has ever been quite good enough to put interest in. Ubisoft Montreal took over the Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake development. Focus Entertainment is going to publish a game called Blacktail, which says it's an action adventure game. Yeah, there might be something to that, maybe not. Screenshots are not really showing me much. Asmodee Digital is going to publish Dark Envoy, a action RPG. Which, yeah, top-down, kind of Diablo clone, for lack of a better term. Forced scroll platformer running on magic has been announced for basically everything. I assume forced scroll means you can never stop moving, which I don't know if I really would want to play a game like that. That sounds annoying, really. And even if you were checkpointing quite a bit, it still feels like it would be annoying. The All Elite Wrestling game titled AEW Fight Forever as Chris Statler and Nyla Rose reveal trailers. I guess this is Nyla Rose. And this might be Chris Statler. I don't even know these wrestlers, though. Death vs. Let It Die has its 3rd developer diary touring the developers Super Trek games. Which, if anything, this just really shows that there's too many developer diaries that they're releasing too fast. Valkyria Phantasm Prelude for PC launches May 18th at Rietsia 19th? I don't even know what that means. Is that a storefront? I have no idea what that even means. The day before PC has been delayed to March 1st. If that interests anyone. A narrative-focused battle royale third-person shooting off the grid was announced for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. NetEase Games has established its first US studio with Jackalope Games. I feel like NetEase is one of the ones that made a lot of visual novels or Japanese-centric games. So it'll be interesting to see what Jackalope Games and NetEase do in the future, if anything. A story-driven puzzle game called Nauru the Forgotten Lands has been announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. We Were Here Forever launch a trailer and screenshots due out for PC on May 10th. This is, I believe, I think this is a continuation of some other co-op multiplayer games, puzzle games. Fortunately, there's no way really to play them as a single player, otherwise I would play them. 20 Presents NIS Classics Volume 3 launches August 30th in North America and September 2nd in Europe. This is a bunch of old NIS games for the most part. Strategy RPG games. A 3D platformer, Lunistus, launches September 2nd for the Switch and PC. It looks pretty low frame, low pixel count there. Yeah, and that's not just the blur. Kind of feels like it's a Infinite Runner / Super Monkey Ball game. There's probably nothing to that. Warstride Challenges is coming to the PS5 and Xbox Series. The Summer Games Fest 2022 showcase event is set for June 9th. Hard West 2 gameplay trailer is available if you want to check that out on Komatsu. Nacon established the Nacon Studio Milan, developing survival game based on popular film franchise. This has been updated. What are they basing on? Movie franchise in question is likely Terminator. Okay. A Terminator game should be good. It has yet to ever succeed, but it should succeed at some point. An open world action RPG called Crysterize for PC launches 2022. It's probably not anything that would interest me. I have about 5 more tabs. Mario Strikers Battle League has an overview trailer and screenshots. Which, yeah, I guess at a certain point, if they're coming out with a new Mario Strikers, then the old Mario Strikers is going to be the predecessor to that, and this would be a sequel. Although I suspect there wouldn't be too much of a difference between one game and the other, although there might be. Let's see, the Spike Chunsoft launched the Hidden Beds Countdown website, and that's been updated, so I suspect that it would eventually reveal something. Here we see some anime characters. Yeah, seems to be just a tease and an advertisement for AI, the Somnium Files Nirvana initiative, which makes sense, certainly. Soul Hackers 2 has a Saizo trailer, if you're interested in that. Umurangi Generation Special Edition is coming to Xbox One on May 17th. What that is, not sure. Looks like there might be something to this. But there could also be, it could just be weird. And then Wolfstride is coming to the Switch on May 10th. Which, what is Wolfstride? A turn-based RPG with mechs. They really aren't showing anything there, are they? Well, what I'd like to do is actually run my macro very quickly here and see what state that will put me in as far as the news to talk about on Monday. So right now it's bringing up my phone list and bringing up 5 to 10 fall list games to clear out. Now it's going through GameDeveloper.com, which apparently GameDeveloper.com's lost its HTTPS certificate for today. No, actually, now it's on what's on Steam that lost its HTTPS. GameDeveloper.com had only about 5 games to talk about, 5 tabs to talk about, which is still kind of a lot for GameDeveloper.com. So now it's going through what's on Steam and opening up every single Steam game that it hasn't seen since I last ran it on Monday, which is quite a lot, but not that many. It's kind of silly to talk about the newest news at the end of a stream, but we might be better off if we did that. What what I should be doing is looking with my eyes as the macro runs to see if there's anything really that important to talk about. And I suspect that the answer will be no, so we can just talk about all this stuff on Monday. And if I want to be really lazy, which maybe I will, I'll just leave everything as far as games that came out on Steam in the past 2 weeks that I didn't see. I'll just kind of leave them in the dust. It's not as big of a loss as it sounds like to not look at every single game that came out on Steam. But yeah, the one narrative and that we were still trying to keep an eye on is, are there adult games being allowed on Steam or not? Like, because it kind of feels like some get through and then some don't. Some get through in one way in which they can have an adult patch, and then sometimes Valve says no, they don't. It seems like it is incredibly nebulous, and it's pretty obvious that it's incredibly nebulous, and there are no hard set in stone rules as to what they allow and what they don't, what animation styles they allow and what animation styles they don't. And it, for the most part, I will say, seems like they have kind of stopped doing the once every 2 weeks on Friday release scheduling, where they were basically bundling adult games so that they would always come out late on Fridays once every 2 weeks, and then nobody would see those adult games because of that, them coming out effectively on the weekend. So let's see. Last one is Video Game Chronicles news. This really shouldn't be moving this slow, the macro. I can only assume that's because I'm running out of RAM opening all of this. Leaked images appear to show a new British Silent Hill. Yeah, it's probably not Silent Hill would be my guess. It's probably something from a different company, completely different. Dead Space remake release date set for January. Alan Wake remaster coming to Nintendo Switch, and Alan Wake 2 not coming out anytime soon. 505 Games gonna have a showcase. Degrading firm WADA is being sued for manipulating the sales of classic NES games. Netflix released a Resident Evil TV series trailer, which is weird because there was a Resident Evil cartoon on Netflix, so I don't know. I saw that trailer and I just assumed it was another trailer for the Resident Evil cartoon that had already come out. But apparently there might be 2 Resident Evil things that Netflix did. A live action Resident Evil. I mean, it's way more ambitious, but it probably is the right move to go through. Certainly it would make a lot more sense to do a Walking Dead type experience with Resident Evil and have realistic looking zombies in a realistic world versus the terrible animation that was in the Resident Evil animated series on Netflix. And this is going back too far at this point. The macro is opening a lot of tabs. But it finished finally. Alright, so let me just quickly scroll through my Twitter feed and see if there's anything new that really needs to be talked about. I don't think there really will be. And then we'll call it for the week. looking back and seeing how tired I was yesterday, my initial plan of streaming every single day this week would have been a nightmare. Plus, it wasn't really necessary anyways. So I'm glad I didn't ambitiously try to go in that direction. Nickelodeon All-Stars adding Jimmy Neutron Ginny, who's some kind of like robot character. I don't recognize her. And Rocco. Which, yeah, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawls kind of needs... They kind of need a lot of characters, but it's going to definitely be, every time they release new characters, 2 out of 3 of them, or at least 1 out of 3 of them, are going to be somebody that most people don't recognize. It's just not going to be as good as Smash Brothers. Yeah, a certain level, that would be a kind of amazing twist for the Switch 2 is to, if Nintendo released something that was more like a fight stick that was its own console, that connected to the Switch or connected to TVs, and really doubled down on Smash Brothers as a fighting game. Like that would be very much an interesting thing. So if you made something and you called it the Switch Advantage compared to like the NES Advantage, it was a fight stick. It has a disc in it that you put the disc drive in to read Blu-rays and install stronger software. If it connected as in parallel with the Switch or played by itself and did both, that would be really cool, instead of having something that was more of a console. Of course, the problem with the fight stick is that particularly kids are going to smash that fight stick like crazy. So it probably would make a lot more sense to still have a console and just have a fight stick be the new controller that they're releasing with it, or focusing on releasing with it, instead of coming out with new Joy-Cons or new controller. Because I really, really don't trust Nintendo to come out with something that I just really, really don't trust them to come out with something, with a new controller that's good. They haven't come out with a good controller in a very, very long time. The Wiimote's not really a good controller. The Wii U controller's not really good. The Joy-Cons aren't really good. The Nintendo 64 controller's not really that good. GameCube controller probably was the last one that even slightly was going in the right direction, or the direction everybody else went, whether that was the right direction or not. Particularly if your new controller was a fight stick, that also sends a different message as far as, hey, the Switch is still the kids' platform and the fight stick is for adults who would play more fighting games. Of course, they could come out with some crazy VR controllers, or controllers that at least in part could be used in VR, and there might be something to that. and that very well may be the way you should go and all console makers should go. Anyways, it's been 3 hours and 40 minutes. That's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to further follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.